Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into some source material all about that classic outdoor experience, camping for the very first time.
Yeah, that's right. The main source we're looking at today is basically a guide for total beginners. It pulls together, advice, shared wisdom. It's like a collection of experiences aimed squarely at someone who's maybe never even put up a tent before.
And our mission today is pretty straightforward.
Hmm.
We want to pull out the absolute must-knows from this source. So if you've been thinking about camping, maybe a bit hesitant,
Mm-hmm.
we want to highlight what this guide says you really need to know to make that first trip work. Make it, fun, safe,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even kind of smooth.
Hopefully stress-free, yeah.
Exactly. So we'll dig into what the guide covers.
Hmm.
Things like getting ready, what gear is actually essential, some practical tips, especially for, say, family trips or handling little hiccups.
Right, what to do when things don't go exactly to plan.
And also, the guide's thoughts on the best time to give it a try, and importantly, the why. The benefits, it argues, make camping worth the effort.
Okay, sounds good. Where does the source start us off?
Well, it jumps right into what it calls the most fundamental idea. It asks this simple question, framing it as like the number one rule of camping.
Okay, I'm curious. Based on all those shared experiences it draws on, like from forums where beginners ask questions, what does the source say is that first rule?
It boils down to something super basic. Be prepared.
Preparation. Okay, yeah. Seems obvious, maybe.
Almost too obvious, right?
Hmm.
But the source really emphasizes this isn't just like a helpful hint, it's the foundation.
The bedrock for having a good, safe time.
Exactly. And it frames preparation not just as, packing some stuff. It's about understanding where you're going, thinking about what might happen, weather changes, for instance,
Right.
and having the right gear and maybe the basic know-how. It's all about trying to head off those surprises that could kind of ruin a first trip.
Right, it's about feeling confident because you've thought ahead, removed some of those unknowns.
Precisely. And speaking of thinking ahead, the source quickly gets practical and talks about the physical stuff, what you actually need to take with you. It lays out a checklist.
Ah, the gear list. Always important.
Yeah, and it presents these items not just as things, but as like critical tools for making that first trip a success.
Okay, so let's get into that. If you're starting from zero, absolutely nothing, what does this guide say you cannot skip? What are the non-negotiables?
It breaks it down into 10 key areas.
Huh?
First up, no big shock, the tent.
Shelter, yeah. Makes sense.
But the useful bit here is the kind of tent it recommends for a beginner. It stresses quality, yes, but crucially something easy to set up. And weatherproof, obviously.
Easy setup is huge for a first-timer. You don't want to be wrestling with poles for an hour.
Totally. He even mentions a specific common model, the Coleman Sundome, because it hits that sweet spot. Affordable and decent waterproofing. It shows you don't need super fancy gear right away.
That's a good practical tip. A reliable tent is definitely foundational, like the source says. Okay, what's next after shelter?
Sleeping. You need a sleeping bag. And the guide says, importantly, match it to the temperatures you actually expect to encounter.
Right, not just any old bag. Temperature rating matters.
Definitely. It points to examples like Melome bags, mentioning they're lightweight, warm, insulated,
Hmm.
but also practical things like being waterproof and machine washable.
Oh, machine washable is a nice touch. Easy cleanup.
Yeah, details that make life easier for a newbie.
Yeah.
And then you need something between you and the ground.
Right, the sleeping pad or air mattress for comfort and insulation.
Exactly. The source highlights things like thickness for comfort, being lightweight. And this detail I thought was great, packing down really small.
Ah, yes. Space saving.
It mentions examples that shrink to like
Mhm.
the size of a thin water bottle. That's a huge plus if you're worried about carrying everything.
Definitely. Okay, tent, sleeping bag, pad. What else?
Essentials for eating. The source groups this as cooking gear. So like a small portable stove, maybe a pot or two utensils.
And the actual food, of course. Planning that out.
Yep, planning and packing your food. Then light. It gets dark out there.
Crucial. Can't stumble around in the pitch black.
The source specifically recommends headlamps because they're hands-free, smart,
Yeah.
but also lanterns or flashlights. And always, always pack extra batteries.
Good advice. Always extra batteries.
And then handling minor problems. A first aid kit is listed as essential, non-negotiable for scrapes, blisters, or, bigger things.
Absolutely. Basic safety.
Water is another big one. You either need to bring enough for your whole trip, or, depending where you are, have a reliable way to purify water, like a filter.
Gotcha. Water plan is key.
Being able to make a fire safely, assuming it's allowed where you are, is also on the list. Matches, a lighter, maybe flint and steel,
Fire starting tools, check.
and some basic navigation tools make the cut too. Maps, maybe a GPS device or a compass.
Interesting. So the source implies maybe don't just rely on your phone.
That seems to be the underlying point.
Yeah.
What if you live service, right? For knowing where you are, even just basically adds that layer of safety.
Makes sense. Don't want to get turned around.
And finally, clothing. The source is very clear on this. Layers, layers,
For the
layers.
classic advice?
For day, for night. And definitely include waterproof options. Because, as the source points out, outdoor weather can change really fast.
Yeah, you can get sun, rain, and cold all in one day sometimes, so layers let you adapt.
Exactly. So having that clear list, it really helps, I think, take the mystery out of the what do I even bring question for a beginner.
Definitely demystifies it. So, okay, we've got the gear sorted, but the source also gets into practical tips, right? Especially for tricky situations like taking kids camping for the first time.
Yes. This is often a big hurdle, isn't it? Managing kids in a totally new setting. The source has some really actionable stuff here.
Like what?
A key one is involving the kids. Let them help pitch the tent, maybe help with easy cooking tasks.
Ah, making them part of the team.
Right. It shifts their mindset from just being, dragged along to feeling like they're actually part of the adventure. The sources suggest this really boosts their engagement.
Less, are we there yet? Maybe.
Hopefully. It also recommends bringing some familiar comforts. Games, books, toys for downtime or quiet moments.
Keeps them occupied. Smart.
And maybe this applies to everyone, but especially outdoors. Pack lots of easy snacks.
Oh yeah, snacks are critical camping fuel. Happy campers often have full tummies.
The source definitely agrees with that simple truth. It also highlights choosing the right kind of campsite if you have kids.
What makes it right for families, according to the guide?
Look for places the source says have beginner-friendly amenities. Things like actual showers, flushing toilets, maybe even some organized activities for kids. It just lowers the stress level for parents.
Take some of the logistical burden off, yeah. Makes it easier.
And keep the food simple. Pre-prepped meals, things that are easy to cook on a camp stove. It means less time stressing about dinner, more time actually enjoying being there.
Another win for reducing stress. Good tips.
Following those kinds of family-specific pointers, the source argues, really ups the chances of everyone having a good, positive first experience.
Makes sense. So stepping back from just families, does the guide offer broader advice for any first-timer? Tips to kind of survive and make sure it's successful?
Yeah, survive sounds dramatic, but you're right. It's about making sure it's good enough that you actually want to do it again.
Exactly. What are the core actions it suggests?
First, echoing that family advice. Choose the right location, specifically a beginner-friendly campsite, one with amenities. Don't feel like you have to go deep into the wilderness on trip number 1.
Start easy. Build confidence. Smart.
Then it comes back to packing those essentials we talked about. That checklist is presented as like the bare minimum foundation for success.
Gotcha. Gear is fundamental.
And here's something that ties back to preparation but gets its own mention. The source really pushes knowing some basic skills.
Not becoming Bear Grylls overnight, though.
No, not at all. Just simple stuff, like knowing how to actually set up your tent before you get out there, how to safely start a campfire, those basic navigation things we mentioned.
It's about feeling competent, not necessarily being an expert.
Exactly. Having just enough skill to feel confident doing the main tasks. The source says this cuts down anxiety quite a bit.
I can see that. What else?
Planning your meals again, sticking to easy options, keeps your energy up without adding cooking stress when you're already, adjusting to being outside.
Keep it simple, yeah.
And finally, always be ready for the weather. Packing layers, rain gear, maybe an extra blanket.
Yeah.
It's framed not as being excessive, but just essential preparation.
Protecting yourself from those unpredictable shifts. Makes sense.
So these basic steps, pulled from the source, combined with the prep and the gear, it really builds a solid foundation for a good first trip, it seems.
Yeah, it lays out a clear path. Okay, so speaking of planning, another question beginners often have is just when? When's the best time to try this camping thing?
The source gives some pretty clear, practical advice on that. It suggests the ideal window, generally, for a first-timer is late spring or early summer.
Okay, late spring, early summer. And what's the thinking behind that specific timing?
It's all about the weather. Trying to find that milder period by avoiding the really intense heat of midsummer or the cold, unpredictable weather you can get in fall or winter.
You minimize the environmental challenges you have to deal with.
Precisely. The source basically frames it as Giving yourself the best possible shot at being comfortable while you're still learning. Make the environment work with you, not against you, for that first critical attempt.
That's smart. Set yourself up for success.
Right. So, okay, we've covered the prep, the essential gear according to this guide, tips for families and general success, the best timing. But let's get to the core of it. Why? Why do people do this? What benefits does the source highlight?
Yeah, what makes all the planning and packing actually worth it?
This is where the source really paints a compelling picture. One of the biggest benefits it talks about is just connecting with nature, actively unplugging from the everyday, breathing fresh air, seeing big views, maybe spotting some wildlife.
That's a huge shift from most people's daily routine, isn't it? That sensory change.
Totally. And that direct experience, the source argues, leads right into another major plus: stress relief.
Yes. Getting away from it all.
Being outdoors, away from the constant buzz and demands of, city life or work life, it offers a real sense of peace and calm, apparently.
I can definitely see that. What else?
The physical side is mentioned quite a bit, too. Camping kind of naturally encourages you to be active, setting up, maybe going for a walk or hike, exploring.
It gets you moving without necessarily feeling like a forced workout.
Exactly. It's activity, but it feels more like exploration. And for a lot of people, the source points to quality time as a huge benefit. It specifically mentions fostering bonds, family, friends.
Just spending uninterrupted time together.
Yeah, sharing meals, doing activities, just talking without the usual screens and interruptions competing for attention.
That kind of focused time is pretty rare these days, isn't it? And the simple setting probably helps strip away distractions.
It seems like it. Yeah. And this connects to another point. The source brings up a mental health boost. That quiet time in nature, that break from screens, it can really improve well-being, encourage a bit of mindfulness.
That deliberate digital detox seems like a big draw for many.
It really does. And then there's a very practical benefit the source includes: learning new skills.
Right, we touched on that, like building a fire, basic navigation.
Yeah. These are tangible, practical skills, things you can actually do. And learning them can build confidence, maybe a bit of self-reliance in a different way.
It's not about becoming a survivalist, but just gaining capability, competence in basic outdoor tasks.
Exactly. And finally, the source makes a very down-to-earth point. Camping can be a lot cheaper than other types of vacations.
The budget-friendly aspect, especially once you have the basic gear, right?
Yeah, once you make that initial investment, the ongoing costs can be quite low compared to, say, hotels and flights. That accessibility is a big plus for many.
Okay, so looking back at everything this beginner's guide laid out, what's the main takeaway? What's the core message for someone listening who's maybe on the fence about trying camping?
It really feels like the source hammers home that preparation isn't just like step one, it's everything. It's the foundation.
Preparation is paramount.
And having the right basic gear, that checklist they provide, makes a huge difference in just being comfortable and safe.
Takes the worry out of it, maybe.
Yeah, and then simple planning.
Yeah.
Like choosing an easy site for your first time, knowing a few of those core skills. The source presents this as the way to get past most of those first-timer nerves and problems.
So prepare well, get the essential gear, plan simply. That seems to be the recipe.
That's the core recipe from this source, yeah. And as it makes clear, the potential payoff, the benefits, are pretty significant and wide-ranging.
From getting back to nature and ditching stress to learning things and connecting with people.
Right. There's a lot to gain from putting in that initial effort, according to this guide.
Understanding these basics, especially from a source aimed right at beginners, it does seem like it could unlock a really rewarding experience for someone new to it.
Definitely. And thinking about those benefits the source highlighted, especially around learning skills and finding that peace in nature, it leaves us with a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
The guide points out how camping teaches things like, reading a map or just being fully present where you are. Think about how learning those fundamental, almost simple skills and just being immersed in nature's quiet, how that might build a different kind of confidence, a different kind of peace.
Compared to juggling all the complexities and noise of our normal daily lives.
Exactly. What can the simplicity of the outdoors, the essential tasks, teach us about what's really essential in the bigger picture?